Thank you all for joining us for a quick conversation on how to close your books on aging AR and set 2021 up for success. My name is Antoinette Aboud. I'm the Director of Customer Success at LevelSet, and we are joined today by Matt from Lockstep. We're going to be doing some introductions, just a quick overview of the agenda today. We'll be talking about some last minute things that you can do right now to close out your aging on 2020 jobs, and then how to set up your customer relationships for success in 2021, as well as prioritizing the most important collection items and benefiting from some automation. For those of you who aren't familiar with LevelSet, we are a company that works with contractors just like you to help subs, suppliers, everyone on that payment chain get paid faster through transparency and really strong customer relationships.
And just a little bit about Lockstep. We're on a mission to connect the world's accounting departments so they can work better together. We have two products, Lockstep Inbox, which is an email really built for accounting departments, and also Lockstep Collect, which is an advanced AR automation solution. And we'll use some of our experience with Lockstep Collect today to talk about how to improve your collections performance.
Wonderful, thank you. And I will apologize, my dogs are on a roll today. So what we're going to do now is stop the share so we can have a conversation. And please remember, post any questions that you have in the Q&A, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. First, I'd like to start with a question for Matt. What are you finding are the most common reasons for slow payment in 2020?
Well, 2020 has been a weird year for a lot of people. We all know that it's a kind of an understatement at this point. But you know, the dynamics of somebody's business will impact their payments. If they're having their own cash flow problems, that will have knock-on effects for you. That's clearly one thing that's been at play more this year than in years past. In fact, at Radius indicates that it's been up 50, late payments are up 50%. So year over year, nothing changed except the pandemic. That's what we're seeing. So that's clearly that macroeconomic environment is one of the things that's coming into play. But the other is that because everybody's being conservative with their cash flow, they are paying attention to people that are front and center with them. So what hasn't changed is your ability to say, look, I'm not going to release more material to you, as an example, unless you pay off some of your bills. So that time, for them to keep their business flowing, they need their materials in that example. And so I think those are things that, some parts of the business have changed and then some parts haven't.
Definitely. We're seeing a lot of the same with some of our customers, and that is a really great segue into what can people do right now? I know that we've chatted a little bit about this, but to make sure that they are prioritizing their communication with their customers and closing out some of those 2020 invoices that maybe they were hesitant to pursue a little bit earlier on, and we're giving a little bit more leeway to people because of things like COVID.
Yeah. Well, we know that, working with customers is all about relationship. And the first thing is important to know is your customer themselves. Your counterpart in accounts payable has what they call days payable outstanding. So they have their own policies for how they pay. So a lot of organizations will say, I always pay 10 days late. That's just what we do to conserve cash. It's not, and they're very predictable on it. So what you then want to be concerned about is when somebody's not being predictable. If they've always paid 10 days late and now they're 20 days late, there's something afoot. And that's because just like accounts receivable, accounts payable has certain service level agreements that they need to make. They're managing cash flow in the same way that AR is. And so when you see somebody's payment behavior starting to change, that's when you want to say, there's potentially more risk here. And I want to have a conversation and find out what's going on. So that's part of just really knowing your customer. I'd be interested to see if you've seen similar things or what you've heard.
Definitely. I think that for a lot of people, COVID really put into perspective what their existing communication process was with their customers. And so we'll have people coming to us saying, these people were never late before, but now they're late and we don't know what to do. And we've missed this window for proactive communication because it's already late.
Right.
And one of our goals is to, one, which we'll get to in a minute, help people get into the habit of proactively communicating with all customers, regardless of whether or not there's a problem. But then once there is a problem, opening up the line of communication so it's not adversarial, and making sure that it's productive communication with exactly what you were saying. What's going on with your business? Is this an expected change? Sometimes it is, sometimes they forgot, or somebody else, like in construction, is sending that preliminary notice, prioritizing their payment. And so you've just sort of fallen to the bottom of the page because they have money tied up in other jobs. So we're seeing a lot of that. And I think that one of the things that we're working with people on is there are friendly documents. You don't have to escalate it and file a lien after 40 days if you haven't received payment. There are ways that you can send out things like invoice reminders that have a really pleasant introduction that is just checking in on people and really being human. I think that that's something that really plays and works well, especially right now when everyone's going through something.
Absolutely. Yeah. To your point about being human, people still do business with people, right? I mean, I think you can't forget that. And the amazing thing is nice people get paid first. So being empathetic, saying, hey, how are you doing? Just open-ended. What's going on for your business? Can we talk about kind of your situation and, work out a plan between? You're much more likely to get paid if you have that conversation than if you just say, hey, you're late.
Exactly. It's assume good intent. Don't go in assuming that they're trying not to pay you. Assume something else is going on, and then you can take it from there. 100% agree. Do you have any kind of documents or like phone call, not scripts, but talk tracks that you recommend for people, or ways of organizing it if they have a lot of AR outstanding right now?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the best practices to have is just having a script and practicing. It also, it can be, if you haven't had to do it in the past, let's say you've had very predictable receivables, and now you're having some that are going past due and you're feeling uncomfortable about that conversation. The reality is the other person's feeling uncomfortable too. Like you said, they're probably not, trying to cheat you out of something. They're in between a rock and a hard spot as well. Everybody's managing things. So first of all, having a script, thinking it through of like, what am I going to say? Practice it once or twice so you feel comfortable when you get on the phone. And then be confident, because one of the things about being confident is you can listen, you can be more open to listening to what they're saying. And so by that practice and being ready, you'll have a confident call where you can have a natural conversation and get to a resolution that both parties can agree to.
100% agree there. It's we even practice some of the calls that we're doing too, just with when new hires come in. It's very similar to a sales function, where sometimes you do just need to get really comfortable having that conversation before you get on the phone and start making those calls. Do you find that the calls are more effective than the email communication? Where are you on that in terms of like targeting your audience?
Yeah, calls are, the way that, as you were talking about, really proactive communications, automated. Imagine the analogy I always like to use is we have a great turnout today for this webinar. So it's amazing to see, this is a good topic and everything. But if the marketing team at Level Set had to one by one email all the potential people to attend this, imagine how many handwritten emails would go out. That's just mind-boggling, right? So marketing, of course, would never do that. but yet we expect accounting teams to manually write emails, right, to send this out. And that's the part that needs to change. Is you really want to use email automation to send reminders, to send updates. And then you're using the phone calls when the traditional things haven't really worked. And it is important to know point, this is going to take human intervention. And so blend of the two, and a lot of times it'll take testing. We have customers that test, should I send 2 reminders before I call or 3 reminders? What, statistically, what works best? But it is, it's really both. You got to use both together.
I definitely agree. And it is about finding the right mix, but it's always interesting to me. You can send out a bunch of emails and you don't want to overload people, but sometimes you'll have sent maybe 10 emails in the last, let's just say, year or something. Somebody might reply to the 3rd email that you sent. They're not necessarily based off what the title is, what's on their mind at that time. Maybe they saved that because they thought, oh, I have to get back to that person at some point, but now is not the time. So it's always important to give them the option too, I think, for your customer and how they want to communicate. And email is a really great way to scale your communication, as you were saying, and then really focus the phone call energy on the people who need it the most.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's also where a well thought out email script can still be incredibly human and open the door for a really productive phone conversation.
Yeah. And how have you, when you think about that, how do you think about assessing risk on a receivable? Is it just the number of days or other things that you put into it?
It's funny. We talk to a lot of our customers about that. And for a lot of them, the email component, they want it to be standardized. The moment that receivable is late, depending on what their terms say, typically 30 days. Some of them have custom amounts of time depending on the customer, but normally it's at 30 days. So at 31 days, that email goes out and it is just a friendly reminder. The language is very friendly, innocuous. It's this amount is now past due. Let's get on a call to talk about it. And then they'll typically wait a couple of weeks. And then they do start to prioritize it by also by dollar value. So they might not call on the invoices that are under $200, but they're going to call on everything else.
Right.
And then I think they're also looking at it by customer too. So which customer has the most outstanding, no matter how many jobs they're on. That's also where I'm going to focus my phone calls. And then you have that second invoice reminder go out at 60 days. So I think that's probably the most standard cadence that I've seen with our customers and what they find to be really productive.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
And so once people are done kind of reacting to 2020 and wrapping our heads around everything that has happened and how business has changed a little bit and how it's still the same, what can people start doing now in your mind to make sure this isn't a problem in 2021, and pandemic aside, that they're setting themselves up for a really productive, speedy payment?
Well, I think what 2020 has shown, are the underlying conditions for a lot of accounting departments. When you've sort of built your process on top of Outlook and Excel, it's really hard, whether you're doing remote work or trying to deal with increased workload because of increased risk, you find the limitations of those tools very quickly. And so I think there's really 3 things when you think about creating, kind of scale and leverage and de-risking going forward. One is that as we've talked about, is email automation. Do you have something that you can configure templates and rules, just like a marketing automation system would do, but really around the aging of receivables, and having that in place so that it's on autopilot. The other part that puts it on autopilot is moving away from paper checks of any sort, right, and getting to online payments. So do you have a customer self-service portal that allows people to see their statements, answer that for themselves, select, invoices, make payments, those kinds of things. And then the third aspect is really an ability to work remotely as a team. How do you have activity management that allows each of them to say, hey, I can pass work back and forth versus relying on Outlook inboxes. So those are the things that, if you have that capability in place, makes performance of collections much better. Bottom line, it makes your bank balance bigger. And it lets you focus on the higher priority, really relationship building activities.
And so when you're talking about some of the activity management with teams, I think Zoom has become one of the new connectors. Things like Slack help get you out of email and communication. What other types of technology do you think people should be investing in if they haven't already to help get them out of that kind of Excel, Google Sheets sort of thing?
That's where an AR automation solution like ours comes into play. So if you think about, as I mentioned, the technology stack of Outlook and Excel, what are you doing in Excel? Oh, I'm manually aging these invoices. Then I'm creating a call list in Excel, right? And I'm having to track my call list. And then based on when I get them, I do a follow-up. Oh, they promised me something, so I have to record the promise in there. And then I've got to do the follow-up in there. And then I've got to do the installment plan. Now, those are all activities that promise, that follow-up, the call list, all of that is being manually constructed by each individual and then shared around. It's very inefficient. Imagine if I didn't have to create my own call list, it was created for me, right? That's the activity management. And after I make the call, I don't have to record the follow-up, it's recorded for me, right? So I can move on to the next one. And everybody can see like how many activities got completed today as a group and who might need some coaching. That's when we talk about activity management, it's really saying we are going to get rid of Outlook and Excel to manage this as real workflow, because you would never have a support organization. One of the things you could think about running a support organization on something like Outlook and Excel versus a Zendesk. Like you just wouldn't do that. So that's really the idea behind it.
Definitely. And I think for us, a lot of this is going into just how can you make your accounts receivables team as proactive as possible. And a lot of that is the enablement tools that you give them, whether it's some type of AR automation, using a tool like Level Set.
Absolutely.
There's so many proactive options. So you take as much off of someone's plate as possible, and then they can really focus on the tasks that have to be manual, but also have a really strong return. So I think that that's something that's really important too when you're looking at being really proactive in 2021. Really front loading the automated communication at the very start of your jobs, as soon as you're voicing, making sure that you're getting things out there. And I think stepping away from the really reactive mindset of, if I send something too early, it's going to upset someone. It's like, not if it's the right communication. And I think that that's really what a lot of that success is about, is how much of your time is proactive versus reactive, and how do you balance out all of that communication and make sure that it's getting out, even if you're not the one that has to manually click a button and type.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's nice because like you said, you get to scale up everything that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. What's one piece of advice that you would give to someone who feels like they're too busy kind of trying to get their head above water for 2020 to do all of these things getting into 2021?
Well, one of the analogies we always, because I think along those lines, we always talk about somebody who's running next to their bike, and you say, why don't you get on? I'm too busy, I can't get on my bike, right? So I'm just going to run with it on my side. So you do have to kind of find find that extra push, whatever that may be, but realize it has a return for it, that it has a lot of recovery. The other thing that, what you want to do is you want to look for the right partner, someone like Levelset, right? That brings a team like customer success into play to help you make that transition, right? And kind of look into it, what we see for ourselves, and, maybe you see this as well. While a project may take, 6 weeks to fully implement, to get all the automation in place and the portal up and everything else, when you look at the active time that our customers spend on it, it's very fractional, right? And it's just over a 6-week period of time. So it's sort of doable, and the return on the backside is really important. So I think that, the number one advice I would do is find a partner that you can work with who has the experience, versus trying, if you're doing this on your own for the first time, it will be daunting, and there'll be lots of dead ends, but with the right partner, you'll be very successful.
I 100% agree. We always hear, even after someone signs up, oh, this is going to take too long, because you assume, since it takes you so long already, that it's going to be a lot of effort. But really, if you just give that 10 minutes at the beginning, 15 minutes, it becomes so easy. It's just running in the background for you. So that small time commitment at the front end is definitely worth it. And then you can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. The other way to think about this also is the only thing that you control in accounts receivable is the number of activities that you perform. That is literally the only thing you control. So the question becomes, how can I increase the number of activities that I'm going to do? And that's where automation and portals and things like that come into play. You're already working as hard as you can possibly work. So once you realize that limitation, suddenly these other solutions make more sense.
Definitely let those other things work for you.
Right.
And I know Ingrid had a question. We will be sharing out the recording for you at the end. Do not worry if you came in a little bit late. We'll be sending that out for you. Now, we do have about 6 minutes left, so I want to remind everyone that you can throw some questions into the Q&A. So Matt and I will be able to answer those for you. Otherwise, I will keep asking questions too. But I'd love to hear from anyone in the audience who has had a interesting 2020 and wants some either advice or to share some stories where they've been able to kind of collect on some of these invoices that they weren't sure they'd be able to collect on. Any question?
It looks like there was one interesting one here. What are some seemingly simple mistakes people make all the time, either in process or in their strategy? One of the simple mistakes that we see is, it's interesting, is the wrong email address. So they send the email to the wrong person and they don't find out about it until it's 30 days late. So really having all your contacts be correct. And sometimes they're missing contact information. So I think, that is one that has an amazingly big impact on your receivables that is easily overlooked.
Definitely. Sometimes we even have that problem when there's turnover at a company and the email address is wrong, or somebody entered something with just like in the wrong place. So it's really important to clean up your contacts. And I don't know if you found this, but sometimes I think companies have been doing things a certain way for so long, and when they come, it's because they've noticed that they're having an actual problem on a specific invoice or job. And the truth is that you never know when there's going to be a problem. You never know when there's going to be a pandemic that causes economic issues. You never really can tell. And so the best policy is that proactive policy. Communicate early and often, build that relationship, build that trust. And even with the people that you have that relationship with, like, send out what you need to send out and communicate. They're not going to be offended or assume that you're saying they won't pay. I think that that's something we run into a lot, is where people are only going to use invoice reminders or these, preliminary notices, which are required, but not threatening, like they're only going to use them to get paid on jobs where they think there's going to be a problem.
And as you think about it as a consumer, we never get offended when the credit card company says your credit card's coming due. I may not want to pay it, but those are the things that, and then of course you do pay because you want good credit.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not, so businesses behave very similar to most consumers, and so when we think about our consumer experience, why wouldn't we want a similar experience in business?
Exactly. And everybody wants to be reminded at some point. It's just how you do it. And I think that those are things that a lot of this webinar was addressing, is how to do that in the right way. And I know that with our team, you can reach out at any point. We have really wonderful resources on how to communicate. I'm sure Lockstep has a lot of similar information as well. Because it is really important to start that communication early and not wait. I think that's a big mistake that people make, is waiting until something is a problem.
Absolutely.
Did we get any other questions here?
There was a question about what are the most common reasons for slow payment. What have you seen?
So for us, I think that there have been a couple of things. Sometimes in construction, it's some type of delivery holdup, something up the chain that's causing that to become a problem, especially if you're working with a sub or a subcontractor. So a lot of times it's something that's even outside of your customer's control. So they're not necessarily the one holding back payment for whatever reason. And in 2020, a lot of the times, if the payment isn't prioritized by sending out a prelim, their cash flow is immediately going into another job right away so they can start work somewhere else. So it's just getting slower at the top, and that trickles down. So that's what we've been finding. Have you found anything different?
No, I mean, usually the reason for slow payment is an issue, right? And whether it's, depending on the industry and the issues, I mean, clearly in construction, I think you've got a great handle on that. But it points back to the fact that there's probably not a most common way. There's lots of different ways. And I think, rather than, as we discussed, don't jump to conclusion on your customer situation. When something has hit a snag, just reach out and try and unpack what's going on and come to a plan together.
Exactly. I think it's just makes it a lot easier to pick up the phone, send an email, and find some time to talk, to see what exactly the problem is, because you're right, it is just a problem and it could be a million different things. Well, it looks like we are kind of at time. I want to be respectful of everybody's day. I know it's the holiday season. Matt and I will be sending out this recording for you. So if you did miss earlier parts, don't worry. And then you can also feel free to reach out with any questions that you have that you didn't get a chance to ask, or that come to you when you're going and starting to make these phone calls and send out these automatic emails. Our teams are both here to help. Matt, is there anything that you'd like to say to close?
No, I hope you found this useful. And as we discussed, you've got a great resource at Lockstep. And Antoinette, thank you for asking us to join you today. So I hope it was helpful.
Thank you. It was incredibly helpful, and we really appreciate you and your team coming and taking the time to do this with us, and wishing everybody the best holiday season and a really great closeout to 2020. And we'll hope to hear from all of you soon if you need any help getting a head up on some of that aging.
Maybe we should put up the contact slide as well, and they could take a look at that.
Hold on one moment. Holding that up now. And here you go. Here's our contact information. We can leave that up on the screen for a few minutes. Thank you all again for coming, and we'll talk to all of you soon.